revolutionise the treatment of mental illness. He spoke to John before last night's premiere in Glasgow.
I've seen what families do to each other. I'm not putting my children through that.
A coward walks away.
A brave man walks away.
Prison's a hospital. Maybe a cure, not a punishment.
David Tennant, thanks for joining us.
Pleasure.
Scotland tonight. We're here to talk about the movie, and on the face of it, a movie about a Scottish psychiatrist might not appear to be box office. What was the appeal for you?
I think it's the character himself. I mean, he was extraordinary. Exactly, he was a psychiatrist. I mean, it's not exactly a sexy topic for a film, but he became this extraordinary kind of counterculture superstar, and that in itself was fascinating to me. And you know, how does someone who you know, trained doing ECT in a hospital in Glasgow become this figure that is then opening for the Grateful Dead? You know, how did he capture the imagination of the world? And he's a fascinating individual, and he's someone whose legacy is still hotly debated even now.
That's the thing about him. He was very charismatic, but actually, in a way, quite an unattractive character, a wee bit bullying at times. How was that difficult?
He was a complicated man. I think he admitted that himself. He was a self-diagnosed alcoholic, depressive. He, you know, had his personal life was checkered, and yet he had huge compassion, and he had huge empathy for people who were in, you know, periods of great psychiatric distress. And within all that, there's this fascinating man, and that, I suppose, is what drew me to it. You know, he would wear these. He was a peacock. You know, he'd wear crushed velvet suits and paisley pattern shirts, and clearly enjoyed being the toast of the town. But at the same time, would then go and hunker down in someone's feces and talk to them about what was making them unhappy. And he was a you know, quite a difficult man to get to the heart of. But that you know, they're always the fascinating characters.
So how did you get to the heart of him?
Well, you know, I read a lot of what he wrote. I stared at films of him, trying to sort of get inside his head, and in the end, of course, you have to make an imaginative leap, and you have to hope that you capture something about who that man was, and something about the mystery of him and what made him this extraordinary character. And
as you said, extraordinary character, his ideas spread.
Yeah.
Have his ideas endured, really?
Well, I mean, his legacy is hotly debated even now. And the Kingsley Hall experiment, which really is what this film is about, where he took a lot of people who were very seriously ill in various stages of psychiatric distress, and himself and some other doctors and the patients all lived together in this place, Kingsley Hall in East End of London, and they lived without medication, and there were no rules, and people expressed themselves however they wanted to express themselves. And the idea being that if you treat people with equanimity, and if you let people express themselves in whatever way they need to express themselves in that moment, then the psychosis will find its own voice, and you talk to that voice, these are hugely controversial ideas even now. I mean, in the 60s they were unheard of. I mean, there were other doctors around the world who were sort of sticking their toe into similar waters, but what Lang did, I think, had repercussions that, and whether that experiment worked or not depends on who you ask. You know, but clearly, I think the fact that the way we think about mental illness now has in some way been influenced by Lang. I think just the debates that he started, whether he had the right answers to the questions or not, the fact that he started those debates, I think you can still feel the impact of that now.
Very intense film. How was it to film?
It's quite intense, but it's also quite funny. I mean, he obviously, it was obviously quite a mad place to live, Kingsley Hall, because some of the people there weren't entirely at one, and Lang himself was not always the sanest individual by his own admission. So I think it was genuinely like living in a madhouse, and there's an element of farce about that at times, and it's also it can be deeply sad, but it can also be sort of slightly lunatic, and I hope the film captures all of that.
Now, you're a busy actor, you've been doing other things, and by the time this goes out, the first episode of season 3 of Broadchurch will have been broadcast.
Right.
What can we expect from that?
Well, it's the final season, so there will be chickens coming home to roost, I suppose. But it's a new case, lots of new characters, but Miller and Hardy sort of rubbing along like sandpaper as they always have, and but still, with the repercussions of what happened in those first 2 series as well. I think what Broadchurch has always done. One of the things that's made it unique is Chris Chibnall's writing has always tried to show what the actual effects of a terrible crime in a small community are, and so even though Daniel Latimer's murder in the first series is now several years ago in our timeline, that's still something that community is dealing with, and now of course they have to deal with the repercussions of a serious sexual assault as well. So it's got, it's Broadchurch. It's pretty intense. It's pretty dark, but it's also a thriller, and it's also, will keep me guessing, hopefully for 8 weeks.
And it's a sexual assault this time. It's not murder.
That's right. Yeah.
So no bodies at the bottom of the cliff or anything.
Well, that's the thing again, and I think that's one of the reasons for doing 3 series and then leaving it there, is that it's a small community and it's about what happens when bad things happen in beautiful places. But bad things keep happening in beautiful places. It becomes a bit preposterous. So I think this is. The story of Broadchurch will be told in 3 series.
As I say, you're an actor of a great body of work, particularly some of these dark characters you're talking about. I'm intrigued. You're a son of the man.
Yes.
Do you have to shed a lot to do that, to do these dark characters? Do you have to get rid of a lot?
I don't know. There's something liberating about it, though, in a way. Isn't it? I'm right in the middle of rehearsing a play at the moment. I'm going to play Don Juan, who's something of a Lothario, something of a cynic, not a man with a lot of moral fibre, and there's something rather liberating about that. You get to live on stage for 2 hours guilt free, and I'm very happy for the upbringing I had and being a son of a man. But the Scottish Presbyterian puritanical hair shirt does mean that one is often propelled forward through life by guilt. So it's quite nice to not have to worry about that for a while.
One of your other famous roles, of course, Doctor Who. You left it behind 7 years ago.
Yeah.
The big debate about who the next one's going to be.
Indeed,
Have you any thoughts on who it should be, or even a lot of debate? Would it be a black Doctor Who, a female Doctor Who?
Mercifully, it's not for me to have to decide. I think it's one of the best roles in TV, and whoever gets it will have a ball, as we all have done who've been fortunate enough to be there. But I'm very glad I don't have to make the decision.
At the very start of your career, I was reading that you've had this stellar career, but you were rejected for Taggart 26 times. Is that true?
I think it grows. This anecdote, I don't know if it was 26 times, but it was certainly quite a few, yeah.
How did you deal with that?
Traipsed up to Scottish television time and again, never got anywhere. I got used to it though. It didn't. I stopped being disappointed and started just chalking them up to experience. No, I mean, to be honest though, part of an actor's life is getting rejected for things. You get rejected for many, many more jobs than you actually get. So, but with Taggart, I did think some people have done like 3 different murders. Some people have been killed 8 times. I couldn't get a foot in the door.
Just very finally, we're interesting political times, and we've spoken politics before. How do you see the Scottish landscape? I know obviously you live in London.
Yeah.
You must have a view.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, being from Scotland, you get asked about this a lot, and the caveat for me is always that any opinion I have about where Scotland goes is irrelevant because I don't get a vote. So it's not up to me to decide. It's certainly not up to me to be listened to. I think the world is in turmoil at the moment, and I'm personally disappointed that I can understand why Scotland might want to stay in Europe.
Right.
I can understand that, if I lived here, I might want to stay in Europe, whatever it might take. But that's but I don't. So my life is, my family now are in London, so. It looks like we're leaving it, whatever happens.
David Tennant, thanks for joining us.
Thanks very much.
It's been a pleasure.